All
Yeah.
right. So Dave Liu is today our best guest ever on the Blind Ambition podcast. David
Wait, are you
Liu.
guys, sorry, are you guys recording? Because, oh no, it is recording. I'm sorry, Jack.
Yeah.
I'm
No,
like, I
that's all
didn't see
right.
recording on. Let's start
All
over
right. So
again.
sorry. Hey, so I'd like to introduce Dave Liu to the Blind Ambition podcast. He is I'm just getting to know him, but this guy, you got to know him. He is a smart person, accomplished, and one of these people who like gets people to work with and improve themselves and enhance their careers. So maybe Dave, you could tell a little bit about yourself and how you got started because you worked at like the top tech companies and then now doing venture capital. So maybe you could walk through how this all started.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me on, Jack. Um, well, I mean, I grew up a child of immigrants from Taiwan and Princeton, New Jersey, and basically went the path that was expected of me to go, go get into top college, go into Ivy League school, go
Mhm.
work at a big name company, and so I did that. I did that to, satisfy and honor my parents, and I ended up working in consulting for a year before joining Yahoo in my 20s. Joined Sony after that, and then went to Stanford for business school, worked at Apple and eBay, and realized I didn't want to work for big corporate anymore. So I joined a startup, and that startup got acquired by another big corporate, Cisco. And I decided I wanted to start my own company. So, I've been gone down the kind of very safe, as some would say, career path of meeting my parents' expectations, getting that resume built up, and kind of building that security that they wanted for me to have. And going through those hoops, I realized at the other end there wasn't there wasn't the satisfaction that I had hoped for. I think every time I had jumped through one of those hoops, I thought on the other end there would be, you know, I would just be really happy with my job, my life, and everything else. But it wasn't as fulfilling as I thought it would be. And then it would just be, okay, well, let's go for the next hoop, and maybe that'll be it. And it never really was until I found my own way, started my own companies, um, kind of built my own identity and figured out what I wanted to do. And that led me to becoming more of an advocate and, supporting my community, and then building up a venture capital fund, Hyphen Capital, which invests in Asian American founders. And kind of a roundabout way, it took me a few decades to get there, but here I am.
I really appreciate you being open and sharing it. Is that because I see this in different cultures where your parents really try to say, with the best of intentions, but sometimes it doesn't work out well, where they want you to do certain things. Is that kind of a thing that you and your, friends and others were like battling against? Like, hey, we don't want to be an orthodontist. We don't want to be a
Yeah.
podiatrist. We want
Yeah.
to do something cool and build something great.
Yeah. No, I mean, I've written about this before, and it's not just the Asian immigrant
Hmm.
community. I think the Jewish community,
Hmm.
like I know people from Africa, Eastern Europe,
Hmm.
they've all come over, and I think it's a mentality of scarcity mindset when you come over with very little and you don't know anyone and you don't have, the security that some people have. There's not generational wealth behind you. You're coming here with nothing, and trying to build a life in this country. I think that is just kind of this it carries on, this precarity and this fear that you might lose whatever it is you have. And I think a lot of our parents who came over here, they didn't want us to feel that way. They gave up everything so that we would have
Hmm.
safety and security that they did not have. Worrying about, paychecks, or worrying about kind of, being able to afford the rent or the mortgage and whatnot. And so I think that mindset is passed on to us just out of love, but it also is out of fear. And so we grow up with a lot of that anxiety in ourselves and thinking, well, I want to, one, honor and respect my parents. And in Asian culture specifically,
Hmm.
in Confucian cultures, filial piety is a culture is very important. And also in Asia, the culture is very much about testing. And so there's only one top school in these East Asian countries, and you have to get the top score. It's all tested. And if you don't get in the top school, get the best score to get in the top school, your life may not turn out so great. And so In the States, it's not like that. There are plenty of schools, there are plenty of paths to success, but I think in their mind, that's the only way to be safe and successful. And so I think they drive that into us as well to make sure that we get all the names on the resume so that we can't someone people can't take that away from us if we do that. So it builds a very conservative mindset for us to not take risks, to be afraid of being bold, to be, go with a safe option. Um, it's funny because many friends who become doctors because their parents drilled into them that they should become doctors, that'll make them parents happy.
Mhm.
They're the most unhappy of all because they never made a choice. Like it was basically you're pre-med, you go to med school, you go to residency, you become that specialty after your fellowship, and then that's who you are for the rest of your life. And so many of them have a lot of regrets because they don't want to be that, but they're stuck in that now. So, but it is, they're doing fine financially, but I think a lot of them feel kind of an emptiness inside.
I see this all the time because I've run a recruiting firm for like up to 30 years. And so often people take jobs because of the parental pressure, the society pressure, and they're miserable. Like they'll be pushed to be a lawyer. And then,
Yep.
10 years in, they're like, I hate it. Or I don't, my statistics could be wrong on this, but I recall with dentists, they have one of the highest suicide rates. So,
Mhm.
you go to dentist, you think, what else is safer than being a dentist? You always need a dentist. But then I guess year after year, you're like, I can't take this anymore.
Yeah.
So it's hard to break out, I guess, right? Like if you have your parents well-meaning, trying to put you on the right path, but you're like, I don't want to be on this path, really. I want to be a different path.
Yeah.
It has to be a little challenging and tough to break away, right?
Yeah, and I think it's scary too, because if they were always there making
Mm,
sure you made the right steps and took the right steps,
mm.
you were never encouraged to fail. And if you don't embrace failure, you can't take risks. You're afraid of failure, so you try to veer away from it in every way you can. So a lot of these folks, even if they wanted to, they're incapable because they grew up making sure they don't make any mistakes. Everything had to be perfect. And so I think that perfectionism
Wow.
often hurts a lot of people in terms of what they're willing to do for themselves because they just can't make any mistakes.
That's so much pressure to live under, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing. Like, I think if you, and it's not that the parents meant any harm by it,
Mhm.
but it's also they didn't have a safety net to fall back on if you did make a mistake. You have to be, you know, it's like walking on eggshells for everything. And so I think a lot of that it takes away the boldness and the audacity to believe in yourself, um, because when you were tracked your whole life, it's very different than thinking, oh, if I go off this beaten path, where will it take me? I have no idea. You're going into the abyss and you have no idea. But um, I learned quickly when I started my first company. I wrote an essay about this about Indiana Jones and Temple of Doom. And Indy stepped off onto that footbridge. Oh no, it was Temple of, it was Last Crusade.
Yeah.
He stepped off onto that footbridge to get the Holy Grail. There was nothing, like he saw nothing. It was just a black hole, and he had to believe that there was something there to catch him and that there would be a path there. That's what happened when I started my first company. I realized that all the people that I had built relationships with in the past, who were friends I've gone to school with or worked with, they were all there to support me, become angel investors, to give me introductions. But unless you're willing to take that step and that kind of boldness and faith, it's you'll never learn, and you'll be constantly wondering, what would happen if you actually did that. So the only way to do it is actually to take that step of faith.
And if you don't take it, you always regret it, I imagine, right? You
Yes.
always look back and say, oh, if I just would have
Yeah.
taken that risk,
Yeah.
I
And
could have done such and such.
the irony is that I was afraid, but I built this whole resume of, you know, going to all these schools and jobs that even if I did fall, I could easily get back up and use that resume and get a job again. It's not like it's the end of the world. I think it's really hard for us to look at what we already have and think, oh, I could lose it all. Like, you're really not going to lose it all. Like, you built that up for a reason. So I kept telling myself, I have to become a I was at eBay and I quit after 4 months because I was like, I hate this place. It was just so much politics and I didn't
Yeah,
think I was just another cog. I was reminded
yeah.
of that. And it was like, But I felt I have to become a vice president before I could start a company because I need to learn how things are done. When I started my first two companies, I was like, none of that stuff applied. Like that's you learn how to navigate a big company and the politics of how to manage up and down, but you don't really use any of that when you're starting with living in your living room, trying to code something and build a product. So I think I told myself that lie because I needed to get the security of having more savings and have enough to start a company before I could take that risk. But then it's not really taking a risk when you
Mhm.
have that big cushion. You're just, and also the stakes are much higher when you have a higher paying job, the opportunity cost of quitting that job, the bills you end up accruing as your lifestyle ends up becoming more expensive. It's like, well, after you get to that point where you're a VP or someone at a big company, do you really want to give it up and go to nothing? There's a lot of cost to when you start later in life to take that risk, and so it is easier if you do it when you're younger because you don't have you have less to lose. But when you have a family to rely on, you're paying for all this stuff, it becomes pretty expensive and risky.
And it seems like what you're and this to pitch a little bit away is that now you have what your hyphen capital.
Yeah,
Is that kind of now your main project you're looking at in terms of
yeah.
building, being a VC?
Yeah, and it all happened accidentally. Honestly,
Mhm.
I had started. I was working on my second company. We had raised $30 million for it, and it was going great. But during the pandemic, I wanted to help a lot of these founders who were struggling to raise money out. I think a lot of people were struggling during the pandemic because circles of investors were just investing in people they knew already, and if you weren't in those networks, you couldn't raise. And so I wanted to figure out a way to help support them. And so I had a community of friends and investors who were successful that I could help, build and invest in these founders. And so we did that first. It was kind of like a let me help two or three companies out on the side. I was still doing my startup, and then I wrote an essay about the bamboo ceiling, which I think not everyone is aware of, but basically it says that, the data is there that in Silicon Valley and in law firms and investment banks and the government, you know, in Silicon Valley, 51% of the workforce is Asian American, but only 20% get to executive levels of VP and above. And so it's a very clear disparity among all races. Asians are the least likely to be promoted. And so I wanted to encourage folks to build their own companies and start their own companies. And so I thought, hey, let me help two or three companies out. This essay got shared. It was supposed to be for this group. I started a community of founders, but it was shared publicly, and basically it forced my hand to lean into that. And in a lot of ways, I was afraid to because, again, that fear mentality of what will people think? What are the repercussions of saying something like this? But I was able to be very vocal about after George Floyd about Black Lives Matter. Um, so like, why couldn't I speak up for my own community? And so that's what I did. And the response was fantastic. And we ended up getting 1,000 people who wanted to invest in these companies, and we ended up investing $30 million in 90 plus Asian American founded companies through the syndicate. And that's kind of how I mean, a friend shared my essay publicly, and that's kind of what made me kind of lean into this. And then
Mm.
I started the fund after doing this. And I think it's kind of a career arc of I've been through a lot of this. I've started crew companies. I want to be able to, I was able to mentor a lot of these founders on the blocking and tackling, but overall fundraising strategy, other things. And I thought, you know what? As I get older, this is kind of, I think, where I want to be. And that's right why I write the essays I do. I think it helps me scale my mentorship beyond just the conversations I have in person or on Zoom. And a lot of the ideas and things I talk about with these founders, um, they're applied to so many other people. So that's why I started writing a lot more. But yeah, that's how I kind of inadvertently ended up in venture. I didn't know that this was where I was going to go. And honestly, I would have joined a venture fund before starting my own. Um, but it kind of happened organically. And I think that's what happens if you pursue your passions. These things happen on their own. And so it was not something I could have predicted, but I'm very happy.
So it seems that, you're looking at yourself and your peers, and you're not really piercing through the bamboo ceiling, as you're mentioning, and and instead of saying, oh, too bad, say,
Yeah.
F it, we're going to do something on our own,
Yeah.
and we're
Yeah.
going to make something happen. And
Yeah.
then that's where you started saying, hey, let's look into, being a VC and raising money, and let's do it for ourselves. All right, if
Yeah.
we can't go through it, we can't pierce through it, or for
Build
whatever
our own
reason,
houses. Build our own houses. Yeah.
let's do it ourselves, man. Let's
Yep.
make it happen, which is
Yeah.
a really good thing to do and a really positive thing. And it looks like it's really growing dramatically, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the thing. I think when you're raised in a place where you're not supposed to make mistakes or you're afraid of
Hmm.
failing, you tend to always feel like you have to ask permission, or you always have to, um, ask permission, but also that someone else is going to make the decision for you.
Hmm.
And so that's something I realized like I don't want to do anymore. And that's how you do it. Like you start your own company, you start your own VC fund, you produce your own movies, you do whatever you feel like you want to do. But far too often when you're afraid, you often look to someone else for validation or acknowledgement. And that's how
Hmm.
a lot of us grew up, looking to our parents, looking to our teachers, looking to our peers for validation. And when you keep doing that and you don't actually find your own way, um, you can be disappointed with in a lot of ways. And also, you're not going to live the life you want for yourself. End up living your life for someone else.
How is it going now? Are you still raising money? You have different
Yeah,
funds, or how? Maybe
yeah,
you share with the audience what they're doing, because they
sure.
might be interested in the companies
Yeah.
that you're working on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm raising fund one now.
Hmm.
I'm raising a $20 million fund to focus on early stage pre-seed seed startups. I'm over half the way there. I just started this year, but I've already invested in 8 companies. It's been really exciting, and I think this is my way of giving back to the community. Also, I think it's when you get overlap, there's this Japanese concept of ikigai, which I've been reading about, and it's when you can overlap kind of your skills, your strengths, your passions, and what makes you happy. They don't always overlap. It's like, oh, what makes money doesn't necessarily make you happy, and this is why, well, I have to be a dentist to make the money, but I'm not happy being a dentist. Then that doesn't align. But if for me, it's like I get to support, founders that I really care about, but I also can make money doing that. And hopefully, if they do well, then I win and they win, and then I can continue to do the work I want to do. But it's not easy for people to find kind of that cohesion of all the different passions and skill sets and ways to make money and into one thing. So feel like I've been very fortunate with that. But yeah, I mean, I think I found my calling with. I mean, I know my superpower is my networking ability, and so I think it's very important for people to identify what that is. For all the people that listen to this podcast and are trying to figure out how do I stand out in my career, it's all about building your own brand and finding your superpower and building on that brand around that superpower. So for me, people look to me. I mean, billionaires, CEOs, like entertainers, actors, whatever, athletes, they reach out to me because they
Mm.
know that I probably one step removed from someone that can help them. Um, and I think in a lot of cultures, a lot of this is seen as very transactional, but you shouldn't think of it that way. I think it's very much about, you know, if you can help people, whether or not they help you in return, it's not about that. Like they may or may not help you down the road, but like people, you build power by showing that you have value. And so you know that's the same thing even in a corporate workplace setting. If you go above and beyond and you can help people, they will look to you and they will talk about you, and your brand is how they people talk about you when you're not in the room. And so in your careers wherever you are, building that goodwill and that kind of reputation can really help you move up to the next level. And so I think that's one thing I encourage people to kind of embrace is figure out their superpower and then build their personal brand around that. Because once you have a personal brand, even on LinkedIn or Blind or wherever else, nobody can take that away from you. Um, I mean, unless you do something really stupid and get canceled, that's your own fault. But if you can avoid, getting in trouble, uh, you want to build that up, and people know exactly what you stand for and why to reach out to you. So for me, I've built that brand. I've become a very strong advocate, in the community for Asian Americans, uh, publicly speaking, openly speaking about these things. I did not mean to become an activist, but kind of stumbled into it when I wrote the Wall Street Journal open letter condemning Asian hate crimes that were happening during the pandemic. Um, but that kind of it galvanized the community around that, being able to speak up from a community that normally is not supposed to speak up or doesn't feel like they have the right to speak up because they've been taught to keep their heads down and avoid attention, and the nail that sticks out is the first to get hammered down. um, but I kind of, and I honestly was afraid of doing that myself, but I think all of the momentum I had built before that, it helped me give me the courage to say something and do something. And now I get messages all the time from people who mention that because of me modeling that for them, they've been able to do the same. So I think it takes a lot to see someone, especially if they see someone who's like, wait, you went down the same path as me, and you got all the safe resume built up, and then you basically could have thrown it all away by doing this. Like, why would you do that? But if you can model it and show others that there's no cliff on the other side, like it's actually okay, it's gonna be okay. That's what gives people the courage to do that. And so, I mean, that's why I produced the documentary on Jeremy Lin and the 38th Garden, HBO documentary, because people hadn't seen that before, and now kids are believing themselves that little Asian boys and girls are thinking, hey, I could actually play in the NBA. But they haven't seen that before, like, unless you were 7'7" like Yao Ming from China, went through that. You couldn't get there. But you know Jeremy's story is very inspiring to a lot of people, and so that's kind of what I want to do with my whatever, however many years I have left on this planet. I want to be able to do that as well to inspire others.
That's amazing. In terms of, if you don't mind unpacking a couple of things,
Yeah,
for a brand, for let's say people in the audience, how do you cultivate a brand like to stand out? And it's almost like you feel like people like, okay, you could get their brand, but how does it? How do you come from like nothing, from zero,
yeah,
to be like, okay, I'm this brand that everyone knows I can rely on by doing X or Y or
yeah,
Z?
yeah. And some people are like, well, I'm not a good writer, or I don't like
Yeah.
to write on social media. I don't want to be on LinkedIn posting. But if you know your superpower and you just share, even if you have like 10 followers, if you start sharing something of value and insight that you've learned from your experience, others resonate with that. You just have to find that kind of that niche and where you provide advice and value to people who need it. Like, hey, I'm, I'm in sales. I found a really good way that's like how to
Mhm.
sell. Some people might not think of this, but I'm just going to write it out there and share it. And other people will say, hey, wow, that's a really great insight. And then they start following you, or they start, sharing ideas with you. But, beyond that, it's even just connecting with other people and, letting people know that you're willing to help, being, becoming a consultant, whatever it is. But once people start talking about you because of your superpower, that's when you start building that brand slowly, but over time, as you build a confidence and you start having these conversations, they will help you, inspire you to write more and go on podcasts and even start a podcast or whatnot. But we're in a we're in a time now where it's so easy to proliferate your own ideas, because of social media, that if you want to create an audience, you can. And some people are, these are a lot of folks I know are introverted do this too. You don't have to be extroverted to do that, to write, you're
Mhm.
just sharing your ideas. But I think it is very much about kind of finding what that superpower is and finding your niche, and knowing who the audience that will resonate the most with you is. And then that's how you build that brand. And then eventually, I know so many people have built this up, and then they get hired by these amazing companies and jobs, because of others saying, hey, this person knows a lot about direct marketing. This person knows a lot about PR. This person knows a lot. I mean, if you can build that brand and reputation up, that's how people will notice you. If if no one's talking about you, you won't get noticed. If you don't
Mhm.
stand out, Like, why would anyone promote you? Like, you have to stand out because otherwise, you know, the majority of folks don't stand out. And so, the only way that you will be recognized or acknowledged is if you do find a way to stand out.
And to add on, when you talk about networking, I think when people hear the term networking,
Yeah.
it has like as the Gen Zs would say, like this ick factor,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
you and I are probably about the same age. You think you go into like this auditorium or wherever conference
Yeah.
room and you have sticky on your name
Yeah.
and they don't do it. How do you network? Because it seems like you're a master networker. And I'm saying that in a very positive way because
Sure.
I see
I'm not
from,
offended by that.
all your writing, your sites and all that, like
Yeah.
you could tell, like you're able to be that guy to
Yeah.
bring everybody into the fold. So
Yeah.
how do you do that without like, I don't know, feeling
Really.
uncomfortable or awkward, or you just do
Yeah.
it?
Yeah. I mean, I think like I've written about this before too, is like the people succeed because of their network, not because of
Mm,
themselves. People open doors for them, people make introductions to them, people will connect you with folks that will help you. But if you are unwilling to build those relationships, if you think of it as something cringy
mhm.
or like everything's all schmoozing and
Yeah,
schmoozy and fake. I used
right.
to think that way too. But then I realized I'd been networking all along because all it is building friendships and trust and relationships. You don't you can be like a used car salesman and meet people and just want to use them. And that's one way of thinking you're networking, but that's not going to work either because people can tell from a mile away that you are transactional and just want to use them for something. Like anyone can know, oh, this person's only reaching out to me because they want something from me. But if you don't call it networking and you just called it relationship building and you're building trust, that's very different. It's like,
All
hey,
different. Yeah.
yeah, right. It's a reframing of what networking is. If you reframe it to like, hey, I'm just building community. Oh, well, that sounds great when you say it that way, but that's really all it is. It's like you building trust. People, they don't care about your resume. They won't remember what your resume says or anything about you other than they like you and they want to work with you and they trust you. If you can build that, that's a network. And over time, as you build more and more of those connections, that's what gives you power. That's what gives you influence. Um, that's when people talk about you because your network is the one that will talk about you. So that's how you build kind of augment your brand by building that network. And I think, amplifying that is important. And if you go out there and help people, provide value, don't be transactional about it. Don't always ask for something in return or expect something in return. That's when you can organically build your network because those people will also introduce you to other people who are like, hey, you know what? It would be great for you to meet this person, or I think you would be really helpful for this person. I have a friend who is working on this project. I think, I mean, that documentary I got pulled in because of my network. Someone knew that I had been at the game that Jeremy played Kobe at Madison Square Garden, and I was on Sports Center, and they're like, hey, you needed to meet these guys. They're making this movie, and so that's how I got. I mean, I have an Emmy Award sitting in my shelf because of
Mm.
that, and that was my network. So I think doors open because of your network. If you have uh, if you don't have a circle of people that can open those doors for you, then it's hard to grow.
Speaking of growing, with the venture capital part of things, you know, it seems to be the hot, sexy thing now. Things ebb and flow, right? If you go on X, formerly Twitter, you see all VCs kind of congratulate themselves, all like the success stories. You never hear the losers, but you hear everything that's doing great.
Yeah,
All right,
yeah,
don't make fun of me. Don't laugh at me. I can't understand for my life, how do people figure out which company is going to really go, which is not? Like, how can you give, like, for the audience,
yeah.
and when I say the audience, I really mean for me to understand,
Sure.
like, how does it really work? How do you know what ones to pick and what not to pick?
Yeah. No, if I mean, I'm not going to be perfect at that either, and no
Yeah.
one claims they are is lying. There is no one way to pick companies. Everyone has their own different ways. And so, I mean, look, Twitter and X there's literally the account. VCs congratulating themselves for a reason.
Yeah.
A lot of these folks, they're building their brand.
Right.
They're all out there building their brand. They're trying to they want to be important. They want to be recognized. So they say lots of stuff out there. they act like experts on everything.
Yeah.
During COVID, they act like experts on vaccines or on infectious diseases. During elections, they suddenly become political analysts.
Yes.
These are people who like to their job is to
Right.
experts or pretend to be experts in everything. And sometimes that goes overboard online, and then they come across that way. But uh, that's there is no right way to invest. I think anyone knows that most companies fail. 90% of like 9 out of 10 companies will fail. But if you can get that one, you're it's mostly luck because you can de-risk your investment by saying, hey, these founders have the right background. This space or this TAM is big enough that it could grow into a company that could be huge. Um, this technology is very defensible. It's very special and unique.
Mhm.
There's legislative changes and opportunities that have opened up the door for something like this. Like or technology changes like GPS in the phone opened up things for delivery and all Uber and whatnot. But you can never tell because things can go off the rails. The founders could end up, getting, divorced and separated and they don't like each other anymore and things fall
Mhm.
apart. But you can't guarantee success in any of these things. It's very much a crapshoot. You can kind of de-risk it with as much as you can by maybe, some of the factors, but there's no guarantee. And so again, I got off X, I still call it Twitter for mental health reasons.
Mhm.
But I think a lot of folks on there like to hear themselves speak, and it's the kind of the culture we're in now. It is the downside of building your own brand is everyone's trying to build their own brand, and so you hear a lot of people just pontificating on lots of stuff that they may or may not know much about. But if I think one of the rules of power that Professor Jeffrey Pfeffer writes, a GSB professor of mine, is that the more airtime you have, the more you speak and talk, the more power you appear to have. So a lot of these folks like they talk a lot because they want to appear powerful. Whether or not they're full of crap is a totally different thing, but they like to hear themselves speak and they think that it gives them credibility. So
So you have that group, and then you have the other group that's kind of head down,
yeah,
working, just figuring it out. Because I was writing about the Y Combinator, different cohorts, and you see so many interesting companies, but like how it's to me as a layman, uh, is this going to be good, not good? Because this one sounds interesting, but like, how
yeah,
can this scale? Can
yeah.
you go somewhere? You know, is it an art to it? Is it like something you just have it in you that people could divine and say, oh, I just
Yeah,
have that touch, or it's just a numbers game that you feed, seed a lot of different
yeah,
companies or startups, and hopefully 1 out of 10 work or 1 out of 20 work, and you hit those big home runs.
yeah. I don't know that it's an art or a science. There have been
Yeah.
books written about it, but
Right.
I think it is. There are things you can do to help, especially if you
Hmm.
know a lot of investors in the later rounds and growth rounds that can help you fund your companies. Again, it's your network. It's who that can help you get there. There are companies that are very good that don't survive because they don't have the right network to get
Hmm.
or their investors don't know the right people to introduce their companies to. Um, in some, it's also market timing. It's like how like the past couple of years has been horrible for venture raising venture because the markets have there's been no IPOs and everything's dried up. But there's a lot of factors um, that come into play that are out of even the founder's control, the investor's control. So I think it's anyone who tells you there's a science to it, they can't control like how the environment or the market works or pandemics or anything else. There's just so many factors. So I think you, Jack, would be just as good as investor as uh,
Just
a lot of it is access to capital. It's like if
yeah.
you could raise $10 million, $20 million and invest it, I don't know, you might have a decent hit rate yourself because
Hmm.
you look at Harry Stebbings and he started podcasts and he started interviewing all these VCs and now he's a VC, but invested in he built a brand for himself. He talked to founders. He was intelligent, and so the other reason people talk a lot about on Twitter and other places is that they're trying to get deal flow. So they want people to know of them. If they don't know
Mhm.
you. I mean, I write a lot also on because I know that like founders will come find me if I'm very active. If you are heads down and all you do is Excel spreadsheets trying to figure out if a company is a good investment or not, you'd be hard pressed to get founders to find founders who want to work with you because they don't know who you are, or you don't have a reputation. But that could change if you have one big win. Everyone wants to be your friend.
Of course, right? They want
Yeah,
that because they want next deal, right? They want to get
exactly.
involved with it.
So if you have one big hit, then everything else can fall into place. And so, but people go about it differently to kind of build that track record.
Yeah, for yourself, would you like to share like maybe some things you're working on and maybe get some attention for people who say, "Hey, this guy Dave's doing something. I'm really interested. I want to invest in one of his funds." We
Yeah,
would you like anyone that jumps out that you like to maybe share?
yeah. I mean, let's see. I mean, a lot of the areas I've been investing in have been very much about, AI is obviously the biggest,
Mm,
thing right now. And so I think for me, investing in a lot of these Asian American founders, a lot of them have been deep in the weeds in a lot of these companies, these bigger companies, or in their jobs, understanding like the dentist, they've been heads down, being really good at being a
mhm,
dentist. They've been good at, you know, building chips or building energy, like understanding, the energy grid, or all sorts of areas that they have built an expertise in, a domain expertise in. And so some of these companies, like I have a company that is like a co-pilot for Excel spreadsheets for all the financial analysts out there on Blind. It's called Rosie. Basically, it can read a model or Excel spreadsheet for you and tell you exactly what the model is trying to do or what it's saying, and then find errors for you.
mhm,
But it can make you that much more efficient. And so I think it gives you superpowers as a financial analyst to look at a giant spreadsheet and figure out that someone was given it to you, that someone gave
mhm,
it to you to break down how it works. So if you're an investment banker or consultant or anything else, they've built a way that you can actually analyze entire spreadsheets to understand what's going on and also help you write formulas. So I think a lot of the things that we're seeing today is augmenting skills that people have to make their jobs easier, but also other areas of investing in. There are areas that are kind of outdated technologies that AI can now allow people to actually modernize. And so I mean, can't a lot of this stuff is pretty stealth still, but there's when there are announcements, I'll be able to share more. But for me, if you are a founder out there who is just has a deep expertise in something, and you know that you can do find a better way, that's someone I want to talk to. I think those are the folks, and a lot of again, this kind of full circle back to our beginning of conversation is a lot of the folks who are at their jobs who are unhappy, but they've built that career and that deep expertise in something they're really really good at, their superpower, but they want to go on their own and build something. Uh, Feel free to talk to me because that's kind of what I want to do. I want to help get people out of that under that bamboo ceiling or feeling stuck in their career and get them onto their own path. And I think, you know, if I talk the talk and I just say, oh, oh, you guys should go quit and do your own thing or, like find a better job or better life. A lot of people are like, screw you, Dave. I don't have the option to do that. Like, well, if you have a good idea and you are really good at what you do, then the option is that you can build a company and I can fund it. So walking the walk of actually giving them an option
mhm.
is really important.
And I take it this is it's a multiplier effect so that if now you build a brand for yourself and you have a large network, then you can go to your network and say, "Hey, I'm working on this project for this
Right.
Excel thing, and here's using AI." And they'll say,
Right.
"Oh, because now they know you by reputation. They've seen you in the Wall Street Journal, they've seen you in the New York Times, they've seen you, in other places. Like, well, this guy is Brad. Like they're not going to put him in the New York Times and Wall Street Journal and all that if he
Right.
doesn't know what he's talking about. So yeah, let me go to him first and see what I could
Yep.
do." So I guess
Yeah.
that's kind of this you get that motion in gear and it just keeps moving, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's the momentum and the compounding like benefit of having this
Mhm,
network is the writing helps people find me and then they get inspired to do something. The network I have amplifies that and then also helps me with founders introducing me to founders, but also
Mhm.
I have a lot of corporate execs who are friends and CEOs and others. I'm like, hey, they could be good customers. They could actually be good advisors or mentors or whatnot, and good investors. So it's like, hey, you're building this retail product. Let me introduce you to, the CFO of Target and
Mhm.
the head of Walmart's, the retail division or whatnot. But it's kind of like if you have the network on both sides. Before I got into all this, I was building a startup around, it was a two-sided marketplace around restaurant workers and restaurants. And I wrote a lot of essays about supply and demand in marketplaces. But
Mhm.
when you can find that intersection of a marketplace and that flywheel starts going, like I have supply and I have demand, that's when the magic happens. So my whole kind of career now is built around all those essays I was writing before about supply and demand in the marketplace. It's like, hey, I have founders, I have investors, I have people who want to work with each other, and so I kind of build that flywheel in my life, which helps keep things going. So uh, I think again, like I said about building your own brand, finding your superpower, finding your own flywheel, and that what you can offer, the supply you have, and the demand you have, that can actually help propel your career too.
And, and I guess what happens is that over the course of time, you know enough people, you have enough context, you've accomplished a lot. So then they start beating down the doors to go to you, and you don't have to go out as much to
Right,
kind of
exactly.
bring
That's
them
the
in. Is
flywheel.
that
That's the flywheel.
yeah?
Because again, everyone at an executive job also wants to get a board seat at a company, or
Mm,
they might have to move to another company because they're not happy. You can only stay as CFO or CMO at a company for so long, so you need to find another one. But if they know that I know other executives that I can introduce them to, then I provide them value too. So it's kind of like there's when you provide value or you show you have value or you can add value, people want to know you. And
mm.
so that's how you continue to build that kind of power and that influence.
Now this might be like really low end here, but is it also do you nurture these folks in terms of like, hey, let's go out for a cup of coffee, let's go out for a drink, let's
Totally.
have this meetup? Is that also part of it too, to just make sure that you're always
100%.
you're not schmoozing, but you really generally like these people, so you want to meet with them and you want to have
Yes.
coffee with them and you want to have a drink with them? Is that
Yeah.
part of it too, just to push yourself? Because a lot of people, I don't know about you, a lot of people I've seen after COVID, they've like lost
Yeah.
lots of ties, and then they're
Yeah.
too shy to go back and meet people, and now they're
Yeah.
just alone and they don't have that flywheel at all. They have nothing now.
Yeah.
So is
Yeah.
that something to do too? Just, hey, let's go for a drink, go for a coffee, let's go to this.
Yeah, I mean that's how you build trust and
Yeah,
friendships, right? You have to
yeah.
actually be with them, and you can also, even if you want to stay at home and do Zoom calls with them, just even catching up with them, picking up a phone,
Mm,
now picking up a Zoom, that says a lot too. Texting with them, but even today I'm having coffee with my friend Jenny Ming. She started Old Navy, and she's like the CEO of Rothy's and on the board of Kaiser and on Levi's board, and you know I get to see her every so often, but it was like a hey, the holidays are busy, but let's try to find time for coffee. But you have to be proactive about that. You can't just,
mhm.
these out of sight, out of mind. People are busy, especially important people are very busy. Um, but the more you kind of nurture these relationships, the more you'll get out of them. And again, like I said, I have no agenda with, Jenny. I have no agenda with these meetings. It's like it's kind of a maintenance of friendships. It's like you have to do that if you want to maintain. It's different than your high school friends who you've known forever and you can reconnect with like 10 years and you're just like old.
Mm.
A lot of these friends, you have to maintain and nurture because people are very busy and they have their own lives. So you have to keep it up. So you're right. It is something that it takes effort on your part too.
Well, this is great. I really appreciate you taking the time out, and I think this opens up, a lot to people who may or may not understand, certain cultures and what's happening, but then also talking about, superpowers, networking, branding. These are things people could watch this, listen to it, and just put into play today. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? They could walk
exactly.
away because you're a very positive guy. You're a very upbeat person. So I could see people just saying, hey, you know what? I could do this. Especially, I like how you say you don't need anyone's permission to do it. Just freaking
Yeah,
do it. If you're
exactly.
really hungry and you want to do, such and such, just go for it. Do it. Right.
Exactly.
So I think
Yep.
I think you gave some really great, advice and guidance to people who particularly these days, and it's so hard, man. It's so hard to get a job for people. It's so
Yeah.
hard to keep your job. So they need all the help they can get. So I really do appreciate all your smart advice. So
No,
thank you.
thanks for having me, Jack. Appreciate it.
Excellent. Thanks.